Hey guys, this is just a quick overview. This is part 4. I'm going to go over a couple of high points for you just to make sure you're understanding everything you need to for this. So what we're talking about today is how muscles work, and we've been talking about the contraction process, and you understand some of the chemicals that are involved in that. One of the things that is important for muscle contraction is ATP, as you know, which is what allows that cross bridge between myosin and actin to happen. So um, this the way your body creates ATP is through intake of food and creating, making that energy through the mitochondria and stuff. So, but there's a couple different ways that your body can use that. So there's actually 3 different ways that your muscles use that ATP and regenerate it. One is creatine phosphate, and then the second one is aerobic respiration, and then there's anabolic glycolysis and lactic acid formation. And there's different situations that cause you to use ATP in this way. So the first one, creatine phosphate, this is for like quick, fast, I need energy right now, and we need to do something really quick right now for a short period of time. Then your muscles will use creatine phosphate to transfer high energy phosphate groups to ADP, which will create the ATP really fast, and you'll have access to that really quickly. The only thing is that it doesn't last very long. It's exhausted in about 20 seconds. So this would be something in like a real quick, like I have to reach out and grab something real quick and hold it tight. That's where this is going to come into play. Aerobic respiration is the total opposite. I mean, this is what happens in your mitochondria. This is how your body uses the oxygen and the nutrients that you take in and creates ATP for long term, usually because of carbohydrate intake and stuff. So you will create ATP long term, and a lot of ATPs because of this process. You end up with 36 ATPs for every glucose that you take in. So this process is happening. About 95% of the ATP that you're making is in aerobic respiration, when you're at rest and when you're just like walking around and stuff. That's aerobic respiration. About 95% of ATP is coming from this process. So you're going to need that for like long-term energy sources. The third way is anaerobic glycolysis and lactic acid formation. This is also short-term bursts, but this is allows for a little more power and a little bit more endurance in the process. So this is a good example of this is like a sprinter. Somebody that's going to run a short race really fast, and they need energy. So in these conditions, you're converting pyruvic acid to lactic acid, and this is anaerobic glycolysis, and that's how why you get like soreness and stuff after really hard workouts, or like if you lift weights really hard for a day, that can happen. But now this is 2.5 times faster than aerobic respiration in creating ATPs, but again, it doesn't last as long as aerobic respiration. This is about 30 to 60 seconds you use up that ATP. So you're not quite getting as much, but you're making it faster, and it's only going to last for a short period of time. So that's the shortcomings of it. Now, muscle fatigue, what happens with that? Basically, what happens in muscle fatigue is you run out of ATP. You don't have enough energy to stimulate those muscles and to allow those contractions to continue, because those cross bridges aren't forming as efficiently because you don't have the ATP to allow it to happen. So what happens is the contraction gets more weak, and then finally it just stops. So this is why if you're working out for long periods of time, you start to basically you're unable to contract as much as possible. You're still trying to create that force, but you're just not able to do it. So that's that muscle fatigue. That's what happens. And this happens sometimes for like long distance runners and marathons. Some of you may have seen that before, where they kind of like collapse at the finish line. That's because they've literally run out of ATP and their muscles just cannot contract anymore. Oxygen debt is another way that muscles can fatigue, and that's because the oxygen that's necessary is just not being delivered fast enough to the muscles as it should. So they're not able to take in that oxygen fast enough, and the muscles supply with that oxygen, they just aren't able to work as hard or as vigorously. So that muscle, the work that a muscle can do and how long it can work really depends on how much oxygen you have in your system. So when muscles lack oxygen, this is why we breathe heavy and we take deep breaths, because our body's trying to recover from that oxygen loss. And when we don't have enough oxygen, also oxygen is necessary to make ATP, so you're going to lose energy and you're not going to be able to contract as often, and eventually not contract at all. So must be paid back. So that's that heavy breathing that we do, and continues until the muscle receives the oxygen that it needs. There are different types of contractions. Isotonic and isometric are two common types of contractions. And isotonic basically is, if there's movement with the contraction, then that's an isotonic contraction. So like if you're grabbing a weight and you're lifting it up, then that is isotonic. Isometric is a contraction that causes the muscle to fire and to work, but there's no movement along with it. So like in this picture here, the second picture, this is isometric, this is isotonic. So here's movement. Here they're just pulling on that string, nothing's happening. Or if you push against a wall, that's an isometric contraction. Muscle tone is also what you see in muscles that are not necessarily active or doing anything, but they do have a tone to them. You can see the form of the muscle. And this happens, this is always like this. You always have little tiny contractions occurring that's keeping your muscle toned and keeping it ready to go. And so that's what creates that tone. So you do actually have contractions in your muscles going on all the time. Just when you need more power is when you have a more obvious contraction, but that tone is created. Now, if you don't have nerve impulses to the muscle with that neuromuscular junction, then you're going to get flaccidity, which means like the muscle is really soft and flabby. And if that happens over time, you're not going to be using that muscle. And so over time, when muscles aren't used, they go through what's called atrophy, which basically you lose the tissue and the muscles get smaller. So that happens without use. It's important to keep your muscles moving and active. A lot of different types of exercise that you can do. Endurance, aerobic exercise. This is like biking, running, jogging, that kind of thing. This is where you're going to use a lot of aerobic respiration to generate those ATPs. Other things, other adaptations from aerobic respiration, your metabolism gets more efficient, your digestion is better, you start processing things better, your heart gets bigger and pumps more blood, fat deposits get out of your vessels, lungs become more efficient. So there's a lot of benefits to aerobic respiration. That's why aerobic exercise. That's why a lot of people take up running and walking and things like that. Resistance exercise is more creating isometric and isotonic contractions so that you can increase the strength of a muscle. What happens here is that the muscle cells actually get bigger. Now, you don't get more of them, they just get bigger. And that's what makes muscles stronger and get bigger. So you just got to know your exercise goals. So which one do you want to build more? What are you trying to strive for? What are your goals? What are you doing the exercise for? And that's how you determine whether you're going to run or you're going to lift weights or what. Really the best types of exercise programs involve both of these things. So this is just a quick overview of some things that are important for you to know about how muscles work and how we get the energy that we need to make the muscles work. And this is concluding part 4.